Welcome to the True Assassins podcast, listeners. We're always diving into some pretty dark corners of history, and today is no exception. But we're going to shift gears a little bit. Forget about the battlefield. Forget the clash of armies. What we're really talking about is the power of influence, especially the hidden kind, and those individuals who operate in the shadows.
Yeah.
And our jumping off point, our inspiration for today's deep dive comes from Orlando Madsbrine's book, True Kill.
Yeah, you got it. See, most people think of assassins and they picture, cloaked figures, daggers, poisons, that sort of thing. But what Madsbrine does so well is he explores how power can be wielded in much more subtle ways, often through individuals with unique skills, used in ways you wouldn't expect. And we've got some really fascinating examples lined up for you today, stories that really get at this idea.
And you brought some incredible historical fiction based on this book, right? So what we're going to do is break down these stories and really dig into the core insights they offer about influence, especially the kind that operates well behind the scenes. And first up, we're going way back, like ancient China way back, to look at a figure everyone knows, at least by name, Sun Tzu. And of course, The Art of War, that's his masterpiece, his military genius. No one disputes that. But today, we're looking at, a different side of Sun Tzu. We're going to examine him as this master manipulator, someone who could supposedly orchestrate the downfall of his emperor's enemies, not through direct combat, but through whispers and rumors, through exploiting weaknesses, all very subtly and from a distance.
It's such a fascinating reimagining, right? I mean, we tend to think of these historical figures in one specific way, defined by one set of actions or achievements. But these stories, they challenge us to consider how historical influence, real impact, it doesn't always come from those big, obvious moments. Sometimes the most significant changes happen through these subtle manipulations, shifting perceptions and power dynamics behind the scenes.
Yeah, I like that. It's like pulling back the curtain and seeing the puppeteer, so to speak. Huh. Okay, so then we're going to fast forward quite a bit to Renaissance Florence. And we'll be in the court of Lorenzo de' Medici, a time and place known for, just incredible artistic and intellectual output, brilliant minds everywhere. But the story we're going to explore, it suggests that there was this darker side to all that brilliance, a hidden reality. And it posits that some of the most celebrated artists and scholars, the ones creating those masterpieces, they were also operating as instruments of influence, maybe even elimination, for Lorenzo. Imagine their talents, their unique skills repurposed for deadly political ends.
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? On one hand, you have this image of Sun Tzu, this detached strategic mind, and then you have the passion and the creative energy of these Renaissance artists. But both stories, they really get at this core idea of how specific skills and even positions can be leveraged for covert and ultimately lethal purposes. And we're going to be looking at the methods they might have used, what motivated them, and the psychological pressures of living those kinds of clandestine lives.
By the end of this, listeners, you're going to have a much deeper understanding of how power can operate in these unseen ways. You'll see how individuals in all sorts of roles can become these key players in hidden conflicts. So, shall we dive into the first story? What do you say?
Let's go for it. Let's start with Sun Tzu and this idea of a shadow war. What I found really interesting in the source material was how it places him not on the battlefield, but in the war council chamber. It's almost like he's this observer watching the game unfold from a higher vantage point.
And the way the chamber is described, thick with the scent of old parchment and veiled ambition, it's perfect, right? It really creates this atmosphere of secrecy, these hidden agendas lurking everywhere. And then there's Sun Tzu himself, not portrayed as this fighting general, but as someone who sees the military leaders as pieces on a chessboard. That emphasizes his distance, his strategic remove from the actual combat, like he's operating on a whole other level.
It's a critical point. His battlefield isn't one of swords and shields. It's the inner circles of power. It's the flow of information. It's manipulating the minds of those in control. And the art of war, it's not just about military tactics here. It's almost like a handbook for manipulation, a guide to understanding human weakness and how to exploit that weakness to achieve strategic goals without ever resorting to direct force. Imagine, knowing your opponent's vulnerabilities before the battle even begins.
Okay, so let's look at the first example, General Tzu. He's described as this arrogant and loud figure, someone who seems almost tailor-made to be susceptible to Sun Tzu's, subtler methods. So how, according to the story, did Sun Tzu engineer his downfall?
The narrative suggests he orchestrated a staged ambush, a fake attack, really. But the key is that the information about this supposed ambush, it was leaked intentionally, from within Zhu's own ranks. Now, that immediately creates this sense of suspicion and distrust, right? It weakens Zhu's authority from the inside out. But what's really interesting is that the source material points to Zhu's pride as being his own undoing, and that really highlights this principle of influence, the understanding and exploiting those pre-existing vulnerabilities like Zhu's arrogance. It can be so much more effective than any kind of direct confrontation. Zhu reacts exactly as Sun Tzu predicts, probably rashly, and that seals his fate.
So it wasn't about the event itself. It was about understanding Zhu's character, how he would react. It's almost like psychological warfare. And then we have Minister Li. His downfall, it seems to be engineered in a totally different way, playing on the economic anxieties of the time.
Exactly. The weapon here is fear. And it plays on the emperor's paranoia, especially his deep-seated fear about the economy, about his own wealth. So Sun Tzu supposedly plants these rumors about counterfeit coins circulating in the marketplace. And then he makes sure these whispers can be traced back to Minister Li, who already has this reputation, this image as being money-hungry. It's a classic example of confirmation bias, right? People tend to interpret new information in a way that confirms their existing beliefs. So whether Li was actually guilty of counterfeiting, that almost becomes irrelevant. It's about creating this believable story that taps into the emperor's fears, those pre-existing suspicions. It's a powerful example of how manipulating perceptions can be just as effective as any direct action. And then there are Sun Tzu's interactions with the emperor. He doesn't go in with direct accusations against Zhu and Li, does he?
Not at all. It's much more subtle than that. The story describes his approach as offering gentle suggestions and veiled concerns about Zhu's impulsiveness and Li's supposed greed. It's like he's planting these seeds of doubt, letting them take root in the emperor's mind. The emperor then feels like he's reaching his own conclusions, but it's Sun Tzu pulling the strings, subtly guiding him towards the desired outcome. And of course, this indirect approach, it also minimizes Sun Tzu's own risk. And the methods employed behind the scenes, they're chillin', it is also calculated. Bribed servants, subtly poisoned tea given to Li, disguised as concern for his health. And then this meticulously planned route that's made to look like a heroic charge, but ultimately leads to Zhu's death. It's also orchestrated.
Exactly. There's this sense of detachment in the way Sun Tzu is portrayed here. He's not directly involved in the violence, but he's the architect of it all. He's pulling the strings with this cold, strategic precision. And the consequences for Sun Tzu himself, they're worth noting. Yes, his legend grows, but there's this increasing sense of isolation, this bitterness. He recognizes the court for what it is, a nest of vipers. But it's almost like his success breeds distrust, even from those who benefit from it.
It's so true. The emperor, he benefits from Sun Tzu's manipulations, but he also becomes more and more wary of him. It's like brilliance itself. When it's used so effectively in the shadows, it can become threatening to those in power. And the narrative emphasizes that Sun Tzu, his motivations, they're not just about personal gain or bloodlust or any of that.
Right. It's presented as this scholar's obsession, this drive to apply his theories, to take the deadly logic of the art of war and see how far it can go. But in this political arena, it's like he sees the court as a living laboratory for his strategic principles. But this comes at a huge cost, a personal cost. He achieves these great triumphs, but he's surrounded by this terrible loneliness because trust and loyalty, genuine human connection, it's all eroded around him.
His victories are built on this foundation of deception, on undermining trust. And the symbolic delivery of Zhu's severed head and then Li's orchestrated suicide, they really highlight the human cost of his strategies, right?
Sure.
It's a reminder that these actions, even if they're hidden, they have real devastating consequences.
It's such a stark image. It shows the potential impact of these manipulations in a really visceral way. And the story even suggests that Sun Tzu realizes he's twisted Zhu into this monstrous caricature to achieve his goals. It's a clear moral compromise. And even the emperor's praise, it's described as being tinged with wariness. It highlights the tension in that relationship. The emperor sees Sun Tzu's power, but he also understands the danger that power poses to him.
And that leads to Sun Tzu's decision to resign, to walk away.
Yeah.
But it's not presented as a failure. It's more like a strategic retreat. He understands that he might be the one pulling the strings, but the whole structure, the web of power, it's unstable, and it could collapse at any moment, taking him down with it. So he leaves under the cover of darkness, taking his treatise with him. And that can be seen as the ultimate strategic move, knowing when to walk away when the game has become too dangerous, choosing to preserve his own integrity, and maybe even the power of his ideas by leaving it all behind.
Absolutely. It sends a powerful message. Some victories are simply too costly to bear, and sometimes the most enduring victory is knowing when to step away from the game altogether, choosing to preserve something, well, something more valuable than political power.
Yeah, it really makes you think about the meaning of success, doesn't it? Okay, so let's shift gears now. Let's journey to a completely different time and place. Renaissance Florence, the world of Lorenzo de' Medici. We're stepping into this era of incredible artistic and intellectual flourishing, but our source material suggests a much darker reality beneath the surface of all that beauty.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition, isn't it? We tend to think of Renaissance Florence, we think of those iconic masterpieces, we think of the birth of humanism. But this narrative, it suggests that all that brilliance was also being exploited for a much more, well, a much more sinister purpose, to maintain Lorenzo's grip on power. And he did it, supposedly, through the actions of his most favored artists and scholars.
Okay, so we're talking about big names, like Michelangelo, the sculptor of David. And the story suggests that his sculptor's gaze, that ability to capture the nuances of the human form in marble, it was also being used for something else, assessing targets. Think about it, the level of observation required for both art and, well, identifying vulnerabilities, they're very similar in some ways.
That's right. And it's this unsettling idea that those artistic talents, those incredibly refined skills, they could be repurposed for lethal ends. You know, that keen eye for detail, that deep understanding of anatomy, the ability to work with different materials. Those are all skills honed in the pursuit of creation, but they could just as easily be used for, well, for destruction. And then there's the Medici patronage, usually seen as a purely positive force, but here it becomes this double-edged sword. It provides resources, a platform for artistic expression, but it also comes with this hidden, this deadly obligation.
It creates this duality, this chilling aspect to those masterpieces. I mean, we've admired them for centuries for their beauty and their skill, but now we have to consider that they might have been created by people who were living these double lives, their artistic genius, intertwined with these acts of political violence. And then we have Donatello, known for those powerful, expressive sculptures, but he's also described as a master of disguise. Again, think about the observational skills required to capture human emotion in bronze, right? Those same skills would be invaluable for blending into crowds, for identifying potential threats.
He could understand human behavior, how people move, how they react, all because he was such a keen observer, so good at capturing those nuances in his art. And that would have made him incredibly adept at, well, at spotting enemies, at assessing danger in the complex political landscape of Florence. And the Medici Palace itself, it becomes this central hub for all these covert operations. They're passing coded messages through seemingly innocuous details in tapestries, or even changing the length of burning candles to signal different things. It's like their magnificent art. It wasn't just about beauty, it was also a mask for their secret activities.
You can imagine this whole network operating right beneath the surface of Florentine society. And all those masterpieces, meant to inspire awe and wonder, well, they might have been surrounded by these clandestine activities, this hidden layer of darkness and intrigue. And the target in this particular story is Cardinal Orsini. His ambition and his greed, they were seen as a threat to the Medici's carefully constructed web of alliances. And the way he's supposedly eliminated, it's so ingenious and unsettling. It involves Brunelleschi, the architect of the Duomo.
Yeah, Brunelleschi, known for his incredible engineering, his understanding of structure and mechanics, he supposedly uses that knowledge to design what appears to be a tragic accident, the collapse of a crucial support beam inside the cathedral during one of Orsini's sermons. The brilliance of it, the chilling part, is that there's no visible violence. It looks like a natural disaster, not an assassination. And that makes it almost impossible to trace back to the Medici. It's like the ultimate deniability, using architectural expertise to commit murder without any apparent human intervention.
It's a terrifying example of how specialized knowledge, even something as seemingly benign as architecture, can be weaponized. And even Michelangelo's David, the symbol of Florentine strength and pride, it's reinterpreted through this darker lens.
Oh, right. Instead of representing just heroic virtue, it suggests a studied ruthlessness in David's expression. It's like it reflects the artist's own capacity for violence, this potential that's hidden beneath that refined surface. It makes you look at those famous works and wonder about the stories behind them, the moral compromises the artists might have made.
And the psychological toll on these artists living these double lives, creating beauty while also being involved in these acts of violence, it must have been immense. It's like their hands were, metaphorically speaking, stained with blood, even if they weren't the ones wielding the weapons. And that inner conflict, it seems to seep into their art itself.
You see it in the description of Donatello's sculptures, how they become more haunted in their expressions. And Brunelleschi's buildings, they start to cast these longer shadows as if they're weighed down by the secrets they hold. And there's this whispered confession mentioned in the story. It highlights the internal conflict these artists must have been going through and the inescapable influence of Lorenzo.
It's like there's this grim symphony playing out beneath the surface of Florentine life, this undercurrent of death and secrecy. And the Medici's most powerful weapon wasn't brute force, it was the ability to corrupt those brilliant minds, to turn creators into destroyers, all to serve their own political agenda.
And it leads to this disturbing paradox at the heart of the Renaissance. You have this explosion of beauty, this incredible artistic and intellectual achievement, but it's happening alongside these ruthless political machinations. It's like there are bloodstains beneath the brushstrokes, these silent screams echoing within the marble, unseen by most, but always present.
It adds this whole other layer to Lorenzo de' Medici's legacy. He transformed Florence, no doubt. But this story suggests it was built on a foundation of manipulation, on exploiting genius, and on keeping these deadly secrets. And it makes you think about the cost of all that beauty, the cost of holding it hostage to the demands of political power.
It really does challenge our romanticized view of the Renaissance, doesn't it? It forces us to confront the darkness, the moral compromises that might have been hidden beneath all that beauty and brilliance.
So let's take a step back for a moment. What do you make of these two approaches to wielding power? They're so different, yet they share this common thread of, well, of unconventional methods. We have Sun Tzu dismantling his adversaries through careful manipulation, this strategic foresight. And then we have the Medici turning artists into assassins, leveraging their unique talents to eliminate threats in ways that leave no trace.
It's that emphasis on indirect action that really stands out, doesn't it? With Sun Tzu, it's about avoiding direct military confrontation, choosing instead to target those vulnerabilities in the political system, in the psychology of individuals. And with the Medici, it's about using those artistic skills to eliminate threats in ways that, well, that don't look like violence, that can't be easily traced back to them. Both approaches, they prioritize subtlety, they prioritize deniability.
And it really makes you think about the long-term effectiveness of these methods, the consequences. Does the lack of overt violence make them more impactful in the long run or less? I mean, with Sun Tzu, it leads to his own isolation, to his decision to ultimately withdraw from the game. And in Florence, it seems to create this atmosphere of fear and compromise within the artistic community itself.
It brings up a lot of ethical questions, too. I mean, does the ends justifying the means apply in these situations? When you're talking about these covert operations, manipulating people, exploiting their talents, no matter what their own morals might be, does the end result excuse those actions? It's a question that's, well, it's relevant throughout history.
No doubt about it. And you can't help but wonder, are there modern equivalents to these shadow wars? Are they being fought right now, but with different weapons? Information, technology, cyber capabilities, these subtle forms of influence that most of us never even see.
It's a question worth pondering. The tools have changed, the landscape of conflict has changed, but the basic principles, manipulating perceptions, exploiting weaknesses, achieving your goals without direct confrontation, those haven't gone away.
Listeners, we hope this deep dive into these stories, these unsettling glimpses into the darker side of power and influence, inspired by True Kill, has given you something to think about. What stood out to you? What questions are still swirling around in your head? We encourage you to explore these ideas further. Maybe look into the history of Sun Tzu, the Renaissance, or even dive into Madsbrine's book. Thanks for joining us on the True Assassins podcast, and don't forget to rate and follow for more addictive Cloak and Dagger stories.